Hello everyone, hello and welcome to this Chamber Low Carbon Technology and Innovation Forum. Today's topic is innovation to commercialisation. I'm Chris Gibbons, I'm an Energy and Environmental Advisor with the Chamber Low Carbon Programme, and I'm hosting today's session for you. Today our presentation is from Ian Trow, giving his expert insights on how to commercialise your innovations. Before we start, I'd like to run through a little bit of housekeeping and some general Chamber Low Carbon information. All participants are on mute. For questions, please see the chat facility that's at the bottom of your screen. This will be monitored by myself and Ian throughout the session, and we'll see when things are flagged up. Alternatively, if you would like to speak a question, if you can use one of the icons, they're all pretty self-explanatory. If you just use a raise the hand icon, that's something that we're monitoring in the actual guests panel on the side, and then we'll just stop the presentation at the relevant point, and then we'll bring you into play so you can ask your question. Again, that's myself and Ian that's looking after that. As most of them will more than likely be written in the chat, we will do a mop-up at the end as well, so we'll make sure that there's no stone unturned. Today's session is being recorded and it's going to be available to watch again on the Chamber Low Carbon YouTube channel. Introduction for Chamber Low Carbon, for those of you that are new and haven't heard of us before. We're East Lancashire Chamber of Commerce and we're in partnership with North and West Lancashire Chamber of Commerce, Business Wise Solutions and Boost. We support businesses across Lancashire to go green, to save money, reduce their carbon footprint, and we're here till the summer of 2023 on the free funded support. If you can move slides for me, Ian, please. Thank you very much. Part funded by the European Union Regional Development Fund, we're currently a £6 million programme and we provide a suite of free services to help businesses improve their energy and environmental efficiencies, introduce on-site renewable energy generation and assist them in saving money and cutting carbon. And if we jump to the next slide, one of the other areas that the programme covers is technology and innovation. And basically, if we've got demonstrator sites, we can help you find those for your new technology. We can also give you consultancy services to get that new technology and that new idea and see the feasibility of it and get that over into market as well. And onto your first slide for you, Ian, before I introduce you. Today's guest speaker is Ian Trow. Ian is the UK IE Business Lead for Quad Plus. They're a large international systems integrator that executes broad-scale power and automation projects worldwide. He has 30 years blue chip experience working with the likes of Du-Pont, Fuji and Siemens, as well as 10 years working at the coalface with SMEs. His experience has brought into focus the needs of all sectors to continuously innovate in their products and their services to scale up commercially and move towards a digitalised, low-carbon, sustainable economy. So a little bit extra on Ian from myself. He's been working with us and our team for 4 years now, and he's really a valued member of the programme, very knowledgeable and a pleasure to work with, and I'm absolutely confident that you'll enjoy his presentation. Over to yourself, Ian.
Okay then, Chris, so thanks very much for that introduction. That's another beer I owe you for those fine words. I'm just looking down the list of attendees and I can sort of see some old friends and old colleagues, in fact, join. So hello to everyone. For those of you who haven't seen me for a few years, I'm still here, so that's always a good sign. Today, what I want to do is I want to make this as interesting as possible, and I don't really want to just sort of have you reading what's on the slides. I want to tell you a story today. So as Chris has already sort of said, you know, the slides are going to be available to you and the video stream is going to be available to you. So if we get into a bit of detail, you can always play it back afterwards. So the main thing today is I want to sort of embellish the pictures that are going to come on the screen with a bit of insight and to try and build a picture, if you like, in terms of this relationship between innovation and commercialization. In the agenda for the next hour or so, something like that, as I say, I'll try and make it as interesting as possible. What is innovation? We're going to ask a couple of big questions. You know, it's usually product, services, process innovation. That's all innovation. I'm going to try and give some context to all of this. So back in the day, we used to have innovation and commercialization for scale up and so forth, driven very much by P&L and you know, EBIT, if you like, on a bigger scale to earn profit or generate income. However, what's happening is we're getting many more dimensions into the need for innovation, and there's a lot more sort of economic and social drivers associated with all of that. So it could be innovation around carbon footprint, sustainability, environmental diversity of life in oceans, sea, plant life, and so forth. So all of this has a context with respect to what's going on at the top level, at the, let's call it, geopolitical level of COP26 and the main themes coming out of that. Another key thing is innovation is a journey, and it's multifaceted. And there's usually a chasm between technical innovation and commercial innovation. And I just want to sort of try and use the next hour to sort of say there's help out there to bridge that gap. And one of the key things, going back not to the Northwest here, where we are perhaps leaders in terms of, let's call it, digitization and smart innovation, and what does all of that mean? So that's what we're going to try and go through for the next hour or so. And the key thing is I want to give you a takeaway for having spent an hour with me, listening to me. I really want to give you a takeaway. And so there's going to be some tips and tricks to get you all started in different walks of life, which I hope will help you along your journey. Okay, let's crack on. A little bit about me. So Chris already outlined that. I'm in industrial automation, have been for 30 odd years. I used to be in high volume product innovation and development for the industrial sector. For the last 10 years or so, I work internationally in things like process lines and energy and automation systems and so forth. I suppose the one takeout, that's the business I head up here in the UK. It's an international US owned business. And so we're into all that power and technology and automation stuff. I suppose the takeout from that is I'm very project orientated, and that will come out as we go through the next hour or so. Okay, so that's just a little bit about my background. Let's start with a really big question. Okay, what is innovation? And I've sort of just put up the strap line from, you know, a corporate view in terms of there's massive opportunity for innovation here in the UK that not only does the business needs, but also starts to tackle the environmental and social challenges that we face here, both in the UK, but also as a planet, if you like. But just to dip into that, and if we were sitting around the table with a cup of coffee, I'd sort of ask for hands, and we'd have a bit of a discussion about it. But just ask yourself the question, just for 5 seconds, what is innovation? And I used to work for Siemens, and you know, Siemens being a very Germanic business, you know, I spent a lot of time in Germany. And if you ask an engineer in Germany, what is innovation? He'll say, it's R&D, it's technique, it's material science, it's pushing the boundaries of physics, all of that kind of stuff, which is absolutely true. That is innovation. But actually, innovation is a lot more than that. It's all about, it can encompass everything from an improved product, an improved process, it could be a different business model, it can be a service offering. And the tag that we're starting to add to all of these things is that we not only have to improve the bottom line and drive the P&L of a business, but we've also got to take our social and responsibility aspect of this in terms of a low carbon and sustainable economy for the future. And the things are now starting to have to bed together. So it's not just about profits and employees and so forth. It's about the values of your business. It's about caring about the environment and taking steps to change the old way of doing things to the new way of doing things. Okay, so it's quite a bit wider than all of that, or than the old way of thinking about why do you innovate. Okay, so we're just going to touch on this a little bit, and I sort of say the key thing there is that the left of the slide is really just picking up those points I just sort of said. You know, what is it about energy reduction? What is it about natural capital in terms of life in the oceans or life in the waters and air quality and so forth, and waste and so forth? It's touching all of those things. And I suppose the other key thing I would sort of say is that innovation is a journey, and it's an iterative journey, and it's teamwork. So whether the picture on the right is a small team as a startup business trying to innovate collectively, or when you go to scale up, how do you bring in a wider team of skills and resources to help you succeed in your growth and your clean growth and your sustainable growth? You know, so those are the challenges along the way. Let's just link it back to the top level. Let's call it sustainability goals. You know, what was COP26 and what is all of that net zero stuff all about? Okay, so I'm not going to give a lecture today about all of this sustainable roadmap, if you like, but fundamentally we started to care about what was happening to the planet and the CO2 in the atmosphere and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. We started to think about those things back in the 90s, but where it really started to change in 2015 at the Paris Accord was that those theories back in the 90s got translated into science-based targets. And it is a hugely complex picture with this, but fundamentally we started to realize as a world, as a global community, that we had to do something. And so we set ourselves some targets to stop the planet warming through greenhouse gas type effects, if you like. And we came up with a roadmap that said to save ourselves by the end of this century, in other words, to limit the amount of warming that is currently going on, we've basically got to get to net zero by 2050. And to get to net zero by 2050, we've got to start making changes now. And some of those changes, we don't even know how we're going to deal with that yet. So basically what I'm trying to say here is we started seriously thinking about this stuff in 2015. We've just been through COP26 in 2021, and we've recognized that the targets that set back here in 2015, we have to achieve, and we don't quite know how we're going to achieve them. And we've really, all of us have to take steps along the way during the next critical decade to meet the interim targets, which is the interim target is to drive the CO2 emissions down by 50% from what they were back in the 90s. Okay, and unless we do that, we've got no chance of getting to net zero by 2050. And even unless we do that, the planet's going to be too hot by the end of the century. Okay, and we're going to have a climate emergency and all of that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to put that in context because that is now starting to drive some of the decision making around the support around innovation and commercialization and financing of businesses, if you like. Okay, so I just wanted to put that in context a little bit about greenhouse gases and CO2. So just to add a little bit of color to the conversation, I'm going to run a presentation now just for a minute, okay, which explains everything that I just said, basically. So hold on to your hats, I'm going to run the video. Okay, so I just wanted to put a bit of context around that. So just to finish that off, what we're sort of saying is, okay, we have different scopes of carbon footprint for everything that we do, anything we produce, any service we provide, the way we run our businesses. Okay, and again, I'm not going to lecture now on carbon footprints and the scopes in detail, but other than to say, we all can influence scope 1 in all our innovations and our approaches to how we run our business. We have purchasing decisions that will influence scope 2 in terms of supply chains, and scope 3 is all about supply chains and the way our customers use our products and our services and so forth. And the reason I'm bringing this to the table here is that investment streams and commercial streams are far more latched onto this, and we are going to get legislation coming down the track that drives our growth ambition for the low carbon and sustainable economy. Okay, so we are going to be impacted by this in everything that we do and every bit of innovation that we are trying to finance or commercialize and so forth. So that's why I'm just putting a bit of context here. Right, let's add something to this. We talked about greenhouse gases a little bit, okay, and CO2 and carbon footprints. Let me add on to that something else, okay? That's not everything about COP26 and all of that, the climate change, macro geopolitical effort that's going into all of that. That's not all. Basically, there's something else called the Earth Overshoot Day, which basically means if you take everything that we humankind consume in everything that we do in terms of businesses and so forth, and the world that we create, the industrialized world that we created, way back 60, 70 years ago, something like that, a bunch of scientists, probably in California, did a calculation that says, at what point in the year does the planet run out of the ability to sustain humankind? Okay, so in other words, all the resources that we take out of the ground, fossil fuels that we burn or whatever, you know, all of that and waste that we put back into the ground, all of that calculation is about what can the planet sustain. And so about 60 odd years ago, they did the calculation. They sort of said by the year end, they worked out that sometime in December, the planet had already run out of the ability to sustain itself. Okay, so we were already in deficit, you know, 50, 60 years ago. I think when they last ran the Earth Overshoot calculation, if you like, I think that had moved to somewhere July or August. So in other words, in summary, we humankind in our industrialized world are using double the amount that the planet can sustain right now. So this is a key point around the COP26 as well. It's not just about carbon footprints, it's also about sustainability and the impact on life and diversity of life, both at plant-based and sea and water-based. It's all of that mix of things. Why am I mentioning all of this? Well, it means that we are all going to have to change and innovate the way that we do things. And fundamentally, that whole Earth Overshoot thing is going to need a move, a shift from the traditional linear economy of the last 200 years, where we basically take resources, we make stuff, we use stuff, and then we throw it all away. All of that sort of production, use, waste into landfill, littering, all of that stuff, we've got to stop because the planet can't sustain it. And we have to move towards a circular type economy, okay, where we minimize the amount of resources that we're bringing in, we maximize the amount of renewable resources that we can use, so for example energy and so forth, and then we make, but then we use, and then we repair, and we recycle, and we upcycle, and we minimize the amount of resources that we're taking away from the planet. Why am I saying all of this to you in a conference that is about innovation and commercialization? Why bother? Well, the key thing is, if I go back to my Siemens days, you know, very strong on things like corporate social responsibility. So the big corporates were thinking about this kind of stuff 10, 15, 20 years ago, something like that. Why else would you want to bother as there may be an SME or a smaller business? Well, you've got to think about long-term security in terms of reducing your waste outputs. You've got to build relationships with suppliers and customers that operate in a different way. But we've really got to also anticipate more and more legislation coming down the track here, where we're going to have to innovate our business models and change the way that we do things. And the real point of this, for this session right now, is that if we're looking to raise investment, if we're looking to raise capital, if we're looking for investees into our business to drive our innovation, then this is going to become a key criteria for investment decision making. All the way from going to your bank manager to try and get an overdraft. You won't be able to get an overdraft unless you have a sustainability plan, and how does your innovation that you want to finance contribute to that reduction in carbon footprint, or contribute to the reduction in waste and so forth. You certainly won't be able to raise capital on the markets or through angels or through other mechanisms without that kind of ethos and that values and behaviors in your approach to innovation. That's why I'm mentioning it now. Okay, so really, what are the key things around this transition from linear to circular economies, this transition from P&L profitability, EBIT generation to actually a low carbon sustainable economy? Well, you know, we've got to think about how things are produced, our products and services, or whatever it is we do. How are we producing them? How do we extend the life cycle of those products, and therefore how do we innovate to extend the life cycle? And you know, how do we create circular value change? How do we create repair services as part of our business model? How do we personalize and lock in our clients and our people and our values and behaviors for a more collaborative sharing type economy? So those are the things that why I'm raising all of this now. Right, let's move on. Typically, an academic business model for innovation around business innovation or technical innovation or product innovation, doesn't matter. You typically have these kinds of phases, if you like, and you go through an exploration phase, a development phase, and a commercialization phase. And I suppose the key thing I'm going to start to feed into the discussion today is typically we talk about commercialization at the back end in terms of when you want to scale up. And the point that I'm going to sort of try and make over the next hour is really you've got to start to think about this way at the beginning. You've got to build the pillars, you've got to build the network, you've got to build the relationships to leverage the attractiveness of your proposition to investees. Okay, and that's what we're going to discuss a little bit now. Okay, so you know, if I just dip into that a little bit more detail, you know, there's lots of innovation challenges that are going in here. Typically R&D, typically defining the concept, validating, testing, scaling it up, manufacturing, whatever it is. Okay, but the key thing that I always come across is there's often a chasm between the R&D and innovation of a business and the commercialization readiness of a business and getting investor ready. And that sort of fits right across the multi-dimensions of the R&D of the thing that we might be producing, the product that it's going in, the service model, the business model, all related to how are we going to go back now to the goals of the geopolitical goals of saving the planet, lowering the carbon footprint, increasing sustainability. So all of these things are starting to link together. There are a number of big companies that have radically changed their business models and driven their commercial models in a different way to meet those sustainability goals. So for example, Philips have a model where you no longer buy light bulbs. I'm talking for larger corporate accounts, but you know, no longer buy light bulbs, put it in the system, they break, throw it away. What you do with Philips, they have a business model where the client buys or pays per lux type of model. So in other words, you're buying the light, not buying a light bulb, you're buying the light. Okay, and so what that means is that Philips have taken ownership for providing the best lighting solution with all the right upcycled materials going into their production and so forth, reducing waste, extending the life cycle of products and so forth. And if a light bulb fails in the Philips business model, you don't change it because you're not paying for that lux anymore. Philips will come, they will change it, and they will then recycle that material and use a clean approach to everything that they're doing. So it's a change in the business model. What else can we add on to this? Slightly different picture, really. I would say it's the same sort of circular picture, but run as a sort of a sequential sort of funnel, if you like, where you've got lots of ideas here, and you're doing the R&D and you're doing the development and so forth. And we sort of always think about that as innovation. And I'm just going to throw onto the table now disruptive innovation. It's about doing innovation in a different way, doing it in an open way. So you're sort of working with partners much more, and you're collaborating much more rather than just purely trying to do it yourself. And then you've got the same thing for commercialization. You're working with partners, you're working in a network, you're leveraging like-minded organizations to help you along this journey. So those are the key things there. But really, I suppose what I've sort of hinted at here is this commercialization aspect needs to be thought about up here. Okay, so let's add another bit of innovation. Innovation is actually can be doing things better. You know, so up to now we tended to think about products, we talked about services, we talked about business models. But actually, if you've got a manufacturing plant, you can innovate by changing the process. And the basis of disruptive innovation in this sense is the use of new data. And this is where the terminology of Industry 4.0 and digitization and all of that stuff comes around in terms of, well, what you do is you sense things much more, you analyze that data, and you do things differently going forward, thereby continuously improving, thereby being leaner, doing more for less, for sustainability benefits, not just P&L and profit benefits. So there's a fundamental shift in the thinking about these things. And if I sort of just add on to this, you know, digitalization, taking digital innovations and applying them to existing, shall we say, traditional technologies, is where you can really take a step change in process innovation. So what am I trying to say in all of this? I'm sort of saying we've got to start to think about our upstream resources of energy and what we use, and how do we innovate to optimize that. And again, I'm not going to lecture now about the pros and cons of wind turbines and solar panels and biomass and smart grids and all that kind of stuff. That's too deep for today. But what I'm saying is think about your upstream resources that you're using. Then think about, well, okay, how are you consuming and using all of those resources? And you've got to think of it then about, well, how could you control it a little bit better? And this is where the strapline of data analytics and digitization comes, because the technologies down here around innovation and digitization directly help us to be better, be leaner, but in a more sustainable way. Okay, so that's the strap line there. And we're really looking at selected processes here. We're looking at perspective in terms of this, because we're all businesses and we've all got to sort of do lots of different things. So you have to keep perspective on all of this. I'm not trying to do an MBA in operational excellence here, but pick the key things and sort of say, can we enable digital transformation of our existing things that we do to help us be more sustainable? That in itself is continuous improvement. That in itself is innovation. Okay, so I've sort of thrown a number of sort of dimensions to innovation onto the table just now. Okay, let's get on to commercialization, okay, which is the basis of the talk today. Okay, so we talked about all this innovation stuff, and when somebody sort of says, right, we've got to commercialize it now, it's not just a marketing plan. It's not just about what are the routes to market. It's not just about the sales launch and so forth. Okay. What it is more about is you've got to do a whole lot more than a marketing plan. So you basically got to do all of these things when you think about commercialization. You've got to think about financial modeling of your innovation or your business plan. You've got to think about how are you going to fundraise. You've got to think about what is your IP. you've got to do all that marketing stuff that I mentioned on the last slide, and you've got to weave all of that into a strategy, which links to the macroeconomic strategies that are, we want clean growth, we want scale up growth here in the UK for a low carbon and sustainable economy. So we've got to marry these things up. So where we always seem to forget when we're sort of thinking about raising finances is we've got to think about it in terms of the investee. So we've got to technically evaluate our innovation, we've got to commercially evaluate it, and then get the trust of who we're expecting to invest in that, that opportunity. And that investor could be family, it could be the bank manager, it could be venture capitalists or business angels, whatever, okay? But basically it's a whole combination of the technical, academic, commercial, legal, all of that leadership has to be combined and fed into what are the results going to be and what is going to be the environmental impact of all of this. So it's all about having skills in a team and creating credibility for the investee. As small businesses or SMEs, you're not going to have that in-house. So that's where the open innovation and open commercialization straplines come into play. And there are organizations, and Chamber Low Carbon is one of them, that is geared up to support this process, support you as businesses to make this transition to commercialization readiness. So we help to bridge the chasm between the really good technical idea and commercializing it. That's the goal, but it's multifaceted and multi-dimensioned. I think businesses generally usually fall into two pots. You know, they're either really good technically or they're really good commercially. And what we've got to do is, investors are basically accountants. So what we've got to do, so the accountants don't know how to do it, but they know it has to be done. So what we've got to do is create a network and a framework to allow businesses, SMEs, to be able to actually achieve the goal that's on the goals that are on the slide there. Okay, so that's broadened out the whole theme of what does commercialization mean. Right. Okay. So let's dig into a bit more detail in terms of experience. So commercialization. Okay. Let's just look at the financial side of things. It's 4 basic elements. It's know your goals. It's know your investor. Know your numbers. Know the risks. Just as it says there. And let's just try and add a little bit into each of those points there. Okay. You've got to make this attractive for the investee. You've got to think about the investee's point of view when you're going to get commercial ready. Okay, so knowing your goals from a business perspective, you know, what do you need the funding for? How much do you really need? How long do you need it for? Is it short term? Is it a long term? What position will you be in when the funding is used up? What will this have for future funding rounds? These are the key commercialization questions you've got to know in terms of knowing your goals. From a shareholder perspective, an investee perspective, you know, he wants to understand what is the impact on the shareholding or on the owner, the impact on control versus cash flow. What else does your business need? Does it need cash? Does it need extra expertise around marketing or networks or access to markets and so forth? You know, these are the questions that an investor will ask. So thinking about the investor, you know, what are the key things? He wants to know about risk. He wants to know about reward. And the raw reward might be cost and cash flow. That's fine, you know, that's clear. But he'll also want to know a time frame, and he's not particularly interested in the time frame around a particular innovation. He's really interested in terms of the time frame for his exit. And that will either be the point at which you've paid back the loan through free cash, or if he's taken an equity stake in your business, when are you going to give him an earn-out opportunity? These are the questions that your investor wants to understand. Okay, so getting commercial ready, you've got to be able to answer these things. Okay, and the key thing there is control. You know, nobody is going to invest in a business or in an innovation or an idea without some level of control. Okay, so you've got to sort of work out as an SME, as a family business, as a one-man band, as an established large SME, you've got to work out, you know, what level of control am I going to allow this investor to have, and how is it going to work, and what's it going to look like, and how I'm going to feel about it. So those are key things about knowing the investor. Know your numbers. Those of us who watch Dragon's Den, where do all the good ideas flounder? They flounder because the people in the den don't know the numbers, or the numbers aren't robust enough. The devil is always in the detail. So really what I'm talking about is your P&L and your cash forecast and your business plan. You know, what are the drivers behind the numbers? You know, what are the operational metrics? You know, if you get an investment, how fast are you running through that investment on you know, overhead and so forth? What are the trends? What are the forecasts? And you have to start to build those metrics right from the very go. Otherwise, the investor isn't going to have the confidence in the fact that you know your numbers. Okay, so that would be a key hint to the SMEs on the call today. And the final point is really know the risks. Okay, and you've got to have a contingency plan. So the risks are looking at your business from an investor point of view. He's putting his money into your business. What are the risks? Any investor will take a look at a forecast that's put up on a P&L sheet and say, okay, that's the best case. All right. So you've always got to prepare a worst case. You might not show the worst case, but you've got to be ready to discuss it with an investor. Are you over dependent on other things like suppliers or technology or customers? You know, are there changing market conditions? How do you de-risk the investment for the investee? Okay, these are the key things around those 4 elements of success for getting commercial ready. Okay, and obviously, you know, there's a lot of data that I've just sort of said behind that. The message at the end of this session is going to say there is help for you around this area of commercialization. Okay, I'll come on to that later. Final bit on you know, getting investment ready. Even as a one-man band with a great idea, you've got to prepare for due diligence from your investees. So you've got to put the effort. You put an effort into the innovation, whether that be a service, a product, R&D, whatever it is, but you've also got to put that effort into getting commercial ready. Okay, so you've got to do these things like the business plan and a realistic cash flow for 3 years and a 5-year horizon. You've got to really make sure you understand your own business model, because they will pull you apart. You've got to have a sales pipeline. And finally, which is the really tricky one for all small businesses and SMEs, is, well, what's the valuation of my business? If I'm asking for, I don't know, £100,000, £500,000 from someone, well, okay, what's the valuation of my business? How do I square that? Okay, so, you know, these are the obvious but tricky questions that have to be asked from time to time. Okay, right, crack on. My tips and tricks around all of this. So I want you to take away some tips and tricks. My personal view is that you need to treat each idea that you seriously take on as a project. That's my personal view. And a project always has 3 dimensions to it, or a triage of dimensions. It has up the front end, why are you doing this? What's the vision of why you're doing this? Okay, and why do you think you're going to be successful? All of that stuff. But then you've got to execute that, okay? And that could be creating a new business model, a new service offering. It could be a new piece of equipment in a manufacturing plant. It could be a new product to go down a production line. You've got to execute it. So there's a project there. So treat it like a project. So you've got to have ideas around the inputs. You've got to manage the automation or whatever. You've got to manage the research and development. You've got to manage your suppliers into that execution of that project. But in parallel, you've got to evaluate it. So you've got to continuously evaluate it commercially, linked to the original planning around your business plan and so forth. So really, I'm stating the obvious here, but so many people forget it. You know, you have a great idea, it fits with your strategy, you decide to do something, manage the project. At the same time, you've got to continuously commercially evaluate it and share that with your investors. Okay, so that's the key thing there. If I add a bit of context to that, there are some tools around that that drive these things. So, you know, in the Chamber Low Carbon world, we use things like growth mappers and these various different tools. The takeaway from this, I'm going to focus in a bit on the innovation canvas, because it's a fantastic tool for doing everything or provoking all the discussions that I've just talked about. Okay, so you have different tools for doing different parts of the project management, if you like, and within the middle of it, treat it as a project. That would be my takeout for you, for anyone who's thinking about managing innovation and commercialization. Right. How do you start all of that? Well, you think about describing the innovation idea. You know, is it a product or is it a process environment? You know, I put all these dimensions on up earlier. You know, who's the customer? Is it an external customer? Well, that's quite easy, but it could be an internal customer. So if you're saying my innovation is going to reduce waste in a production process, great, okay. So who's the customer? Well, actually, the customer might not be the end customer. It might be an internal customer, like the, I don't know, operations director or whatever, you know, who's driven by continuous improvement metrics on his targets. So you're sort of providing him with a solution. So you've got to think about, is it internal, external customers? What are the benefits? Is it commercial, or is it purely an environmental benefit or sustainability benefit? And the other key question is, can you do it on your own? Do you need help? What do you need? So those are the key tips and tricks of start to think about this stuff. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to introduce this tool, which is called the Innovation Canvas. And you will see it's a free tool. And I thoroughly recommend all of you, anyone on the call, at least take a look at it. Okay, it's from Innovate UK, and it's the basis of what we use in the Chamber Low Carbon in terms of trying to frame people's ideas on the way into us being able to support them. Okay, and basically what it is it helps innovators to find the most urgent challenges in their project, now I've just mentioned, and to decide what to do next. And it's a really nice little tool, because what you can sort of see is there's three simple legs. Every project is different, so there's no fixed starting place with all of this. And there's no fixed point to begin with. But basically, the trick is to do a very quick, rapid assessment of where you think you are on all of these strengths and weaknesses within your project, your innovation project. And then you consider the questions that are marked in each of the three key drivers. You know, there's the opportunity driver, the offer driver, and the capability drivers. And we've got sub-questions that go in here. All right, and each driver is made up of 4 topics. Okay, so the way this works, just to sort of give you a bit of insight, is you do it very quickly. And I tend to like to use the paper version because you can do it as a team. You can, so if you're a big company and you're looking to drive an innovation through your big company, you can then bring in cross-functionally other members of the team, of the project team, and you do it together. So it's great for team building. If you're an SME, you can bring in outside agencies and use it as a project management tool. So it's a really, really good sort of way to start. So the way you go through this is that very quickly, as a team, you mark yourself out of each of these questions that get asked on this canvas. And number 1 means you haven't really thought about it and it needs a lot of work. And a number 5 is you've got it pretty well sorted. And my hint to you, my experience for using this tool is don't agonize over it. You know, it's the immediacy, it's the gut feel of the numbers. That is a quick way of ranking your readiness for each of these topics. Okay, so just to break this down a little bit more, each of these legs, if you like, these drivers, and each of these sub questions have a question associated with them. And you might read these questions and say, oh, that's a bloody obvious question, that is. It's amazing how often the obvious questions are the most difficult to answer. So what we've got there is, user needs under the, why are you doing this? What's the opportunity in the market? What's the pain point? What are you trying to solve for the customer? Okay, what difficulty are you overcoming? So these are the types of provocations that this model brings to the table. It asks you the obvious things about the size and trends, but you've got to know the answers. And if you haven't done the research, then you're not going to know the answers. You have to put a 1 in there. Okay, so it's really a way of working your way through where you're strong and where you're weak on each of the key areas. So for example, what is the product that you're trying to do? Describe it to me. Okay, so often I'll go into a business and I'll say, and somebody tells me this wonderful innovation, I'll say, right, okay, what's the user benefit out of it? So it's just asking those obvious questions. And it's also protecting a little bit of legality here, because we start to ask, well, okay, what is the USP and what's the IP associated with your ideas, and have you protected it, and all of those kinds of things. And so the really important part is the capability. What kind of leadership do you have in the business? Do you have a strategy? And most importantly, how are you going to finance all of this? Where are the costs going to be out of this project? Who's going to pay for it? Who's going to invest it? Are you going to fund it from cash flow? How are you going to manage that? All of those basic questions that have to be brought to the table to get commercial ready at the start of any project. Okay, so what this sort of says is you go through this as an iterative process. It evolves as you go through the project. So it's a project management tool, but it's also, you test the validity of some of the scores that you raise. So here's one I did earlier. And don't worry about all the writing, but you can sort of see how I tend to use this. And you can sort of see a lot of 2s on this one and not many 5s. And when I put a 2 in there, I was probably being kind, and it should have been 1s, and what you can sort of see is I circled the 2s, which basically said we've got to do more work on this. So here, for example, market, we hadn't really got to grips with the market analysis of it, and so what it does is it prioritizes the top challenges, and then coming out of it as a team, you decide what you're going to do about it, and it continually evolves as you go through the project. And coming back to the commercial readiness or the commercialization of innovation, any investor, whether he's investing $500, 50,000 or $500,000, is going to want a handle on all of these points. So it's a great tool to get started, to begin getting commercial ready. Okay, and you brainstorm in the team in terms of what you have to do. Okay, so that's the idea behind it. And for those of you who are really digitally orientated, there's an online version as well. Okay, so the key there is that's a free tool. It's a really great tool. I use it all the time. And we in the chamber use the basis of that tool, and there's the website link there, and we'll put that into the chat a little bit later, but you can go click on that link and you get access to all those resources from KTN, and they're free. Okay, that's your takeout. Now that's my free little gift for listen to me so far. Okay, so there we go. Right, so we talked about open innovation. We talked about open commercialization as a bit of a model, a few buzzwords earlier on in the presentation. Basically, there's lots and lots of help here in the Northwest to help all businesses drive innovation, get commercial readiness and commercial investment, and to be successful and scale up for the low carbon sustainable economy. Masses and masses of support. So what you see here are the key partners in the Northwest, in particular in Lancashire, that are put together by the Lancashire LEP to really drive the industrial heartland of the UK. And so if I think about Lancashire assets in itself, you've got this coastal arc of the Lancashire LEP and the Northwest, okay? And there are key things that are of interest, both industrially and politically, okay, within that structure. And some of those key areas could be everything from, I have to get my glasses, I have to read my notes. It could be everything from microhydro, or it could be microplastics removal for sustainability, next generation battery technologies. It could be climatic sensors, it could be air source heat pumps, it could be bacterial sciences and so forth. So all of those areas, those key innovation, what would you call it, prime capabilities of the Northern Powerhouse assessment that was done a few years ago, are there in the Lancashire LEP, and the Lancashire LEP and government want to support this process. So the key message here is there are a number of partners around catapults, technology catapults, universities, specialist faculties within those universities, linked to the sustainability and the environment, linked to business improvement, linked to Chamber Low Carbon and the Centre for Alternative Technologies for Lancashire, which I'm going to come on to now. Okay, so lots of help out there. Where do these bits of help fit into the commercialisation picture, if you like, or the roadmap? So typically these are the TRL numbers. So, you know, we start with pure ideas here, basic principles, all the way up to scale up and beyond. Okay, and you have these groups and clusters of TRL here. And basically, we're trying to shape the commercialization approach across this roadmap here. So what we have is, at these points, these early stages, this shaping of the innovation side, we have the team within Chamber Low Carbon, we have the business support from Boost, the Lancashire Boost, we have the university mechanisms and support mechanisms, not only from specialist faculties like science or bio, eco or engineering, but also you've got the support from the SME support within the university footprint as well. And so there is a collection of groups that are there to support SMEs on this journey of innovation and commercialization. What we're really talking about is how do we start to manage this picture here in terms of really getting commercial, and really sort of starting to think about how do I go about getting my next tranche of investment for my idea or my business growth. You know, typically here you might be thinking about 150K up to maybe 250K in this kind of area. And angel investors are typically there because they can claim tax breaks and so forth. So there's a mechanism for getting support there. And then maybe you start to edge into venture capital side of things when you start to talk about, you know, up to $1 million and so forth, those kinds of numbers. You really start to look at full-scale commercialization and how does the ecosystem of commercialization within Lancashire support you to do that. And that's what RedCAT is geared up to achieve in partnership with Chamber Low Carbon. So what we're trying to do here is create a bridge between the early days to the full scale up multi-million-pound businesses that operate in this area. And as I said earlier, there's usually a bit of a chasm between the brilliant ideas, the brilliant entrepreneurs, the brilliant innovation that occur down here and actually achieving scale up in volume. Okay, there's a chasm because down here we have to be absolutely commercial ready, and to be commercial ready here we've got to be thinking about it here. Okay, so that's the message from the session today. Okay, so what else? What are the mechanisms to help here? Well, Chris alluded earlier to what Chamber Low Carbon does at that front end of the process, you know, where you're really getting a good idea, and it could be around low carbon technologies around energy reduction. If you remember, how do you take less resources out of the planet? How do you use renewable resources and those kinds of things? But then you've also got that phase in the middle where you got genuine ideas. It could be product ideas, service ideas, it could be circular economy ideas, it could be business model ideas. How do you take that, and what supply chains might you need within Lancashire? So this is where this area comes in. And then, you know, the whole sort of supply chain and support services and boost and all of that kind of stuff are part of that multifaceted triage, if you like, that Chamber Low Carbon provides at that front end of the innovation cycle. Where I'm sort of bringing onto the table now is this picture of something called RedCAT. So that is red for Lancashire, but it's the Centre for Alternative Technologies, and RedCAT is to act as part of an ecosystem. Okay, it's really trying to say we will be your partner to bring open innovation, open commercialization. We're going to bring you into a network of collaboration and resources and skills and best practice that bring your strategy together, your financial modeling together, your fundraising together, your intellectual property together, your access to industry and key sectors, sector leads, as well as your marketing plan and your value proposition design and your routes to market side of things. That's what the entity or the entirety of commercialization really means. So RedCAT was prime pumped from something called the Getting Building Fund, okay, and is geared over the next 2 or 3 year period to support scale up of true innovation linked to the low carbon and sustainable economy of the future. And within that, we offer that support for full commercialization support. So we're providing a pathway to get through all of these opportunities of support, whether it be incubators, innovation incubators, whether it be, I don't know, catapults, digitalization catapults like Made Smarter, AMRC in the Northwest, that's the Advanced Manufacturing and Research Centre, all of that smart manufacturing side of things. How do we start to answer the questions that the investors really want to know and feel about? How do we help you manage that relationship? How do we bring together public sector leadership and private sector leadership to suit your goals for scale up? That's what RedCAT is all about. And as it sort of alludes to in the picture there, we're the center point, the cog that makes all these supplementary cogs work in unison for your business. So we are effectively a low carbon technology accelerator and scale up program. So that's what RedCAT is all about. What would I add to that? I would sort of say we have already masses of opportunity to go at here. These are the number of businesses that we're dealing with. If you like, within RedCAT and Lancashire and the Northwest, we have a number of core prime capabilities for the Northern Powerhouse, whether they be the energy and utility side, whether that be transportation, aerospace, manufacturing. Those are the key, I would call, sector leads within Lancashire. And we are hooked with them not only to bring best practice, but also to bring investment support and commercialization support, but also in terms of potential sales pipelines and relationships for product sales and expanding SMEs' influence within the network of industry within the Northwest. So that's what RedCAT is all about. There we are. This is the call to arms. So basically, I've sort of outlined where innovation is and the multi-dimensions of that. I've outlined the challenges around that. I've outlined the commercial links to all of that. I've tried to give you a takeaway tips and tricks tool to use to make a start. And finally, I've sort of said, okay, there's help here. And if you want help, and if this is of interest to you, then make contact with Chamber Low Carbon, and we'll help you along the path to accelerating your goals. Okay, so there we go, Chris. I've finished speaking. Hopefully, not everyone is asleep. So, Chris, whether you want to come back in and tidy it up for us.
Hi, Ian. Thank you very much for that excellent presentation. I suppose it's just waiting for to see any questions on the floor. I'll just sort of scan the chat. If anybody wants to raise a hand, we can bring you in. Okay, what I'll do is I'll keep it moving, and I'll just ask one or two myself that I've jotted down as we've gone along. What are common hang-ups and perceived barriers from the SME market in terms of getting them over the line, and how can you allay them fears? I know you deal with all sorts of businesses, but what are there any sort of common points of apprehension for people moving forward with innovation and technology?
Absolutely. So typically, you know, we come when we got a great idea, we're really scared to share it, typically, and we also don't always know what we don't know. Okay, in other words, what I'm saying is that there's a whole world out there of like-minded people who are only too willing to help and collaborate and support businesses and innovators and entrepreneurs and so forth. And really what the move around the term innovation, there's a new term that's called open innovation and disruptive innovation, and there's two aspects to that. The open innovation is to create an ecosystem of like-minded innovative people who bounce off each other and share and help each other, both technically but also business-wise and also commercially. Okay, that's one aspect. That's the open aspect. The other aspect is then the disruptive aspect, where I've alluded to many times, because a key driver in the Northwest is digitization in the innovation, and how do you build upon that? And so there's a whole I don't know what would you call it, there's a whole sort of panacea of digital expertise that is geared up to work with innovators, whether it be at process level or at product or service level. And so, you know, it's creating the trusting environment for entrepreneurs, for SMEs, for family-run businesses to actually say, I've got the trust, they've got my back, no one's going to run off with my idea here. And there's lots of legal and commercial ways that we can manage that security in terms of NDAs and all that rest of it. But fundamentally, to answer your question, Chris, I think previously there's always been a bit of hesitancy to be open and take best practice from other people when you've got a really good idea. And really the message here is that, you know, that's the way forward, and we will support you to have the confidence to take those steps.
Right, obviously the slide with us being one of them, but the slide with all the slide with all the support entities on it. It's obviously a good one. Sort of a part two of that, and I know it can be difficult, especially with, as you say, people want to give the idea. Have you got any sort of rough examples or faceless examples? You know, you're not giving any trade secrets away where someone has been apprehensive and they've actually got through to market. You know, a lot better than maybe they could have imagined.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I can't say too much, but I mean, you know, what I would sort of say, you know, we've got very clear product innovations, service innovations, and also, let's call it manufacturing scale-up innovations that have come through the program. What I would sort of say is, you know, they range from, you know, one-man band startups to actually multi-million investment, entrepreneurial sort of investment in, shall we say, next generation sectors such as bacterial sciences, for example. And you know, we've got the whole range, and again, you know, it's a bit difficult to get into specifics here because, you know, we're all under NDA. But what I would say is that if we were to just sort of have a sit down in a managed environment, we can certainly share some of those success stories and some of those, you know, those roadmaps that have really achieved something. Yeah.
So let me just have a quick scan. My chat icon's gone off, and so I'll keep it rolling to see if anybody else wants to join in a conversation. What's the typical low-hanging fruit in terms of who's the target? I know we can cover everyone, and we do want to cover everyone and prove that there's a broad spectrum of support for whoever you're on. There's a way that we can assist people. What tends to be the target market, and are there any industries or outliers where people didn't think that they could have this type of support, or they didn't think they could move forward with it, but actually you were able to prove them differently?
Oh, right. Okay. I mean, I suppose principally what we're trying to do is we're trying to support the macro objective of the Northwest to create more jobs, and in particular manufacturing value-added jobs. Okay, so that's sort of an answer to your question. So we're particularly interested in the key sort of sectors that exist: manufacturing, smart manufacturing, aerospace, transport, energy and utilities. But we also work all the way down the supply chains to those sector leads. So you can be a small manufacturer supplying, I don't know, maybe soap products into facilities management, okay, but you're employing people, and so actually you actually fit into the manufacturing slot. You might not be what I would call advanced manufacturing. You're not sort of 3D printing gizmos and turbine blades and stuff like that, but actually you want to grow, and you've got a product that is sustainable because you're using non-toxic materials in your new soap product, if you like. And so absolutely we want to support your manufacturing scale up. Absolutely we want to support you because you're going to employ more people and higher skilled people. Absolutely we want to support you because you're linked to sustainability. You're thinking about the circular economy. You're thinking about, how do I make things better, smarter, for less? And equally, we also want to make sure that your product has pride and place within Lancashire. So if we got facility management businesses in Lancashire, we're going to say you need to be tying these things up. So across that spectrum of business support, if you like, or business network ecosystem, that's a small manufacturing business as an example, which hasn't necessarily just come up with a new fantastic widget. Yeah.
No, that's perfect. That's really good, really helpful, especially for, as you say, the broad scale of top end and what's expected. Obviously, some of the obvious things is people that use high energy they're going to want to reduce it, aren't they? But as you say, it comes all across the supply chain. Again, it's somewhere that people can exploit the supply chain as well, isn't it? Obviously, we're here and we're advertising ourselves. They can come straight to us, and again, they don't need to give away the trade secret, so to speak. But they can consult their supply chain. They can ask up, they can ask down, can't they? Ask what people are doing, and it just might be that that's where the access seems to be, or the knowledge of the access for people to funnel in and come to us. As I say, I understand if you're listening to us today, you know where you can find us and find things that are similar that we've talked about. But it's another way of exploiting what types of support and assistance in this area, isn't it? Talking to your peers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. And I wonder, what's the landscape of Lancashire at the moment for technology and innovation? Are we looking healthily? Do we have to sort of look outward outside the county from the work that you're doing with ourselves?
Well, no, I mean, it's absolutely flying. Lancashire is flying at the moment. I think on one of the slides I sort of said, there's 650, low carbon, sustainable, interested businesses that we're actively working with. There's over 150 specialist technical product developers in Lancashire. There's over a couple of hundred specialist low carbon products that have been generated in recent years out of Lancashire. And Lancashire also leads nationally on key sectors such as aerospace, advanced manufacturing, transport, and energy and utilities. So really, to answer your question, Lancashire is absolutely flying, and it's not just Lancashire, it's the Northwest. So that's why you've got the macro stimulus, if you like, of government granting and Build Back Better grants and getting building grants. that are driving into the Lancashire LEP, and that is then cascading through programs like Chamber Low Carbon and RedCAT, and all the other programs to continue this momentum that's been created over the last 5 years.
And a final one for me, I can't see much. I might think of another one because I don't want to necessarily end on a negative. What barriers are there? So obviously things are very localized. We hear lots of, north-south divides and, trying to things about leveling up and stuff. What are things that people should be aware of, and what are the challenges to try and overcome, basically, rather than it being a barrier? It's probably the wrong term, but what challenges are there to overcome with innovation and getting it out there, or is Lancashire, from the numbers that you've spoken about just now, is it doing so well that there isn't too many sort of perceived barriers?
Well, I mean, I think there are barriers, and I think that's why we're on the call today, is to spread the word of the success stories and to say, there is business excellence here in this context. There are like-minded organisations, big and small, who not only want to continually drive and grow, but grow in the right way from a sustainability point of view, but they also want to help other businesses. And so there's a whole ecosystem that operates within the Northwest, and what the purpose of today's call is really just to try and spread that word a little bit. There is huge success that has been achieved over the last 5 years, and that is recognized, and that's why the Northwest leads the country in the various catapults and digitization and advanced manufacturing and all of that investment that's gone in. And the key message here is that Chamber Low Carbon and RedCAT is here to be those cogs in the wheel of the bigger engine to make it all a success. You don't have to do it on your own, but unless you know about it, then you don't know to get involved, and that's the message of today.
So, see, I didn't need to think of a positive question there. You've spun a very, very positive answer. So thank you very much. Okay, I've not seen any hands raised, so I think we'll be okay to say that's us. I'll just slightly finish off and tidy up and say if there's no questions, just to thank you again, Ian. Fantastic presentation. Fielded my questions very humbly as well, as soon as it was just me talking. But thank you very much for your presentation and your insights today. It's been excellent, and obviously this will go up and be recorded for plenty of others to see, as well as our guests today. And to our guests, thank you very much for attending. And just to let you know what we've got coming up, we haven't got anything published as yet, but we are publishing our Lunch and Learn soon. So we'll be putting on our normal monthly Thursday Lunch and Learn sessions. We're going to be giving out the titles and the speakers in the coming week or two. So keep your eyes peeled for those. And then our other general events and larger events and specialist events like this, if you keep an eye on all the social media channels, you'll be able to find what we're doing and where we're up to, as well as logging onto the Chamber Low Carbon website. You'll also be able to sign up there and get our newsletter, which will have that information for you as well. Okay, so thank you very much, Ian. Thank you very much, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Okay, thanks everyone. Bye-bye now.